Hello and welcome back to the Final Lap podcast. This is Josh. I'm joined as always by Sam. We have probably the fullest weekend of racing we've had so far in 2025 to get to and recap with you guys today. First off though, Sam, how are you doing? How was your weekend?
I'm doing great, yeah. Full weekend, a lot going on, a lot to watch and catch up on, but it was certainly an up and down weekend for racing, but overall I thought really enjoyed watching the races.
Yeah, it was definitely a busy one this weekend. All three of our main series, F1, NASCAR, and IndyCar going, as well as a race in IMSA and Formula E as well. So a lot to get to with you guys today. First off, we'll start in Bahrain with F1, where Oscar Piastri wins from pole position in Bahrain as he drove away from George Russell in second, who was also able to fend off Lando Norris behind in third position. Oscar's the first driver this year with multiple wins as he moved to second in the standings, just 3 points behind his teammate, Lando Norris. I thought it was a great drive from Oscar to get his second win of the season, first driver to do that. And I just think it was a stellar performance from him and one that he'll gain a lot of confidence from this season.
Yeah, it was a fantastic drive from Oscar, and it was really one of the easiest win anyone's had all year. Even though, it could have not been that way. Obviously, Russell, Norris, some other guys back there could have chased him down, but Oscar was just fantastic in qualifying, fantastic in the race. And, yeah, they have the best car, but he did the most with it and took care of business.
Yeah, I agree. And, both of his wins have seemed very easy for him so far. In China, he got out to probably a 3 or 4 second lead over Lando and was able to hold that before Lando fell back a lot in the closing laps with a brake issue of his own. I think he ended up winning that race by 9 or 10 seconds. And then here he wins by 11 or 12 over George, just kind of based on pure pace alone. So seems like if he can get out front and really control the pace, he's one to take advantage of that definitely and not let anyone get past. Even like we saw kind of a mid to late race restart with the safety car there. He was able to hold off George, who was on the softs behind. Should have got a better launch than Oscar was able to on the mediums. So, yeah, I think it was a very impressive performance and one where it just seems like if he gets ahead, he's just able to keep that and ride with it through an entire race.
Yeah, that was really the only time the whole race I was even mildly concerned for Oscar, but I figured even if George got past him there in the short term, those medium tires I think worked pretty well most of the day, and just with the pace of that McLaren, I thought it was going to be pretty tough for George or anybody else to catch up. They really just have a complete car right now. Everything's kind of firing on all cylinders. Obviously not 1-2 every week, but still got 3 out of 4 wins so far this season and plenty of podiums already.
Yeah, I know Oscar's still second in the standings. He's behind his teammate Lando, but if you look back through the races so far, I mean, he was right there with Lando in the opening race in Australia before the rain came, and he was one of the first ones to the scene and managed to still get some points in that race and finish in 9th. And then, in China, obviously, he ran away with that win. He was right behind Lando in Japan last time out, and then here he runs away with the win as well. So if it wasn't for that, first race where he makes the mistake in the rain, the same one that Lando made, Lando was just able to save it a little better. Oscar, it took him a bit more time to get out of that trouble, but that's really the only blemish on his card so far this season is that one mistake, and one that if he had that back and was able to recover in a similar way as Lando did, I think he would be ahead in the championship right now.
Yeah, really, if he just kept it on the track there and finished anywhere on the podium, he would have a sizable lead in the championship, given that we're only through 4 races. I think that so far, even with Lando having a slight championship lead, it still feels like Oscar is the driver to beat.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we'll see. And next week, Lando could win, and that could kind of go back to even and all square, and we'll see where things go from there. But at the moment, like you mentioned, Oscar is so dominant in both wins, and really, other than that mistake in Australia, has been the man to beat so far this year.
Yeah, well, I agree. I think it feels like he has been the better driver so far this year, other than that one mistake. So yeah, I just think it's kind of, if Oscar wins this week, he's in the championship lead. If he beats Lando really I don't think they're going to come in like 6th and 7th next week. So I think if he does beat Lando next week, he'll be in the championship lead. Obviously, that could not be the case if, like I said, if they're back in 7th or 8th or whatever, but I doubt that'll happen. So next week we'll really, decide the championship leader. And that's pretty exciting, and I think we're in for a real championship battle between two teammates that's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to see some other teams get involved, but right now that's just not really feasible. I mean, McLaren already has almost a 60-point lead in the constructors, so they're just they're not miles ahead. There's other teams that can kind of keep pace on their day, but week to week, as far as consistency goes, they're the clear number one team right now, and so that's what we're left with. I do think that this will make for an exciting championship, though, if this is what we're left with. These two guys, neither of them obviously have won a championship before. Both are kind of new to this, only winning races in the last year or so. So I think that we're going to see a really ferocious battle, especially with the new reg changes coming next year. You never know what could happen after that. These guys both might think it's their best chance to ever win a championship. So I think that we're going to see some fireworks. I know that they're getting on pretty well so far, but I think we're going to see some real excitement later on this year.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's only a matter of time before they butt heads on track, and that'll be really interesting to see how McLaren handles that with their whole papaya rules thing and everything, to see how they handle an inter-team battle between two guys. And we already talked about last week about maybe favoring one of the two drivers. We'll see if they make that decision. Right now, it doesn't feel like they have to, just with their lead in the constructors. It feels like they can kind of just let these guys race it out on track and figure it out. But, assuming no one else catches up in the constructors, I'd love to see obviously I'd love to see more teams fight for wins every week. But, just for a championship between those two guys, if McLaren separates themselves, then we'll at least have that as an interesting thing, of those two guys probably be free to fight with each other if that's the case.
Yeah, and I mean, after a couple of years of max dominance in 22 and 23, I know that last year we got a little bit of a championship battle, but I think we've got potential for even more this year, and I think that'd be thrilling for the fans. And I think that even if nobody else has it in them to battle for a championship, we're still going to see some other race wins eventually, some exciting podiums. I don't think it's going to be so scratch the whole year or so chalk that we end up with McLaren 1-2 all the time. I mean, like I said already a couple times, they haven't been 1-2. So we're going to see some outside podiums. We're going to see some drama, and we're going to see some other teams step up in the moment. Until someone gets some upgrades, there's nobody that's going to be able to match that level. And so that looks like the two that we're going to end up with here at the end is Norris and Piastri.
Yeah, and like I mentioned before, both of Oscar's wins coming from pole position, kind of taking advantage of that and separating himself from the field. But we've also seen, every race winner so far this year has been from pole position. It kind of just feels like F1 has, in some ways, turned into like a qualifying championship, and really Saturday kind of decides things. Like I said, every winner this year has come from pole. Overtaking is, seemingly harder than ever in the sport right now, even on a track here in Bahrain where, overtaking has been easier than some other places in the championship. In the past, it didn't, there were some overtakes this week, but it didn't feel like, everyone had a great shot at making a move throughout the race. Especially once you got up front near the top positions. A little farther back in the field, there were definitely some moves on, but up near the top, it didn't really feel that way. So it kind of feels like right now the most important thing in F1 is laying down that qualifying lap, getting on pole, and really making it through turn one in the first lap fine.
Yeah, I think it's a little, I think it's too much of a blanket statement to say that it's fully a qualifying championship. I do think that the issues can be more track dependent than a series-wide issue. I mean, the McLarens have enough pace right now. I think if they put it on pole, they are likely to win the race. The only exception we saw to that was in Japan, where it was a track where there's some issues with overtaking all weekend. But for me personally, I think even though the lead wasn't that interesting this race, even though we didn't really get a battle for the win, we got a lot of on-track battles still. We got a lot of overtaking, a lot more than we saw in Suzuka. So for me personally, I think that this is just a more track-dependent issue. We're going to see some tracks this year where it's just how they qualify is pretty much how they finish, and unless there's some strategy shenanigans, we're not going to get much. But I think that track to track there could be some excitement, some action, and I enjoyed watching this race a lot more than last week's.
Yeah, I thought this race, this weekend was much better than what we had last week. It just kind of feels like right now qualifying is, more important than it's ever been. Just throughout the entirety of a schedule in F1. I mean, for years now, Monaco, places like that, qualifying has been the key for a weekend and getting that one lap right. And, not every race this season is going to be won from pole. That's just, not really possible. Someone's going to have mistakes and whatnot. But it does feel to me, at least, that qualifying, getting that lap right, getting, your one lap pace down, and then having just enough, a good tire deg and everything throughout the race is really like the best way to go about this and to put yourself in a good position to win. And I think especially in that, inner McLaren battle, I think it is even more important there because if you're, ahead, you're going to get the right strategy call every time. They're going to have to favor you in that race, whereas if you're behind, you're going to have to make that move the hard way. You're not going to get any favorable strategy. They're going to pit the guy in the lead first over you. So, for the McLaren inner team battle there, I think also qualifying is just you have to be in front, and then you have to stay in front really through that first lap and kind of establish yourself where you are in the race so that you can get, first call and first dibs for whatever pit strategy is right for that weekend.
Yeah, I do agree there, although I will say if you're 1-2, I don't think that they're going to worry about that too much pre-race. You'll get to see them kind of figure it out the first turn, first lap, and then maybe go from there, see if someone gets off to a bad start or whatnot. But like in this race, with Lando starting back in 6th and Oscar starting on pole, there was already a clear incentive. I think even Lando said himself before the race that he was pretty much going for second because he knew that with that much of a head start, there was no way really that he was going to catch Oscar. So, I mean, it is more important in that sense that you've got these two guys likely going to be the two battling for the championship, and if they're not 1-2, it's really makes it a lot more difficult for either one of them to win. So, yeah, I in that sense, I agree with you.
Yeah, and especially for Lando this weekend, you're right. Him qualifying that far behind, you're really, I mean, there's no chance that you can win that race when your teammate is starting on pole, except for him having a huge mistake, having some mechanical failure or something, or your side of the pit wall decides to do something completely different, and you get lucky with a safety car or something, and that vaults you a little bit more forward in the standings. But like I said, McLaren's not going to take that risk of probably running Lando longer there or something to get a safety car, because that wouldn't feel very fair to Oscar and his side for him to get pole and be leading the race like that, and for it to be taken away, not of his own doing. So it's just really you kind of put yourself in the hole if you're Oscar or Lando in this case, if you qualify that far back behind your teammate in this inner team battle, just because the pit dynamics and everything there, it's just not going to be in your favor at the end of the day.
Yeah, and this early in the season, you're never going to convince the team to give you a preferential treatment in that scenario. If Lando was well up in the championship, then maybe it'd be a different, it would have worked out differently, but that's not the way it is, and it really looks like it's going to be tight here. down to the wire. So I don't think that the McLaren's going to give anyone preferential treatment here for a while. They're going to let them duke it out on track, especially with the constructors not really being in the balance right now. Maybe if someone gets a big upgrade and we see that come more into play, then they'll think about it. But I don't think they have to worry about the constructors at the moment. As long as they can keep the cars on track, they're going to do well enough. So, yeah, just let them battle, and as long as they can be smart about it, I think that they're not going to have an issue with that.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I'd rather them battle it out on track, and I think that's what we're going to see. I think that's kind of what Papaya Rules is mostly is go at it on track, battle it out, figure it out yourselves, but don't make a move where you're going to take both of yourselves out of the race. I think that's pretty much what the Papaya Rules are, and I'm good with that because to me that produces the best finisher in the race, and the one that deserves it most is going to finish ahead. So I'm right there with that. For Lando though, his weekend was just a complete mess. Started quali way back in 6th. He was a half second pretty much off Oscar's pace that he was able to set in qualifying. Then his great start, he had one of the better starts we've seen from him in a long time, especially going back to last season where he just couldn't get off the line well at all. We saw that, and that was really the big talking point of Lando's season last year. This time he gets a great start, but he's also ahead of the pit box by just a little bit, kind of rolled on accident a little bit outside of his box. Max picked that up, called it in, and he got a false start penalty there. Only 5 seconds, so you can make a bit of a recovery from that. In the grand scheme of things, it's not too big of a deal. But followed that up with an overtake of Lewis off track, had to give that position back, so that sent him back a few more seconds down the road than he should have been later on when they had that late race or mid race restart. And then he just really struggled to overtake Leclerc there. It didn't seem like he had any way past him, and this is something I've noticed with Lando a little bit. I feel like he has a really hard time overtaking when the guy ahead just covers off the inside. I feel like he really struggles to figure out a way around in a position like that. He was finally able to make it work on Leclerc around the outside, but that was after a few laps had already gone by, and at that point he kind of killed his chances at getting to George and getting that second place, which would have been really nice for him in the championship. So, Lando, it was a very messy weekend. I still think he has a lot of things to work on, especially in overtaking when, like I said, the guy ahead, he covers the inside. Lando, it just doesn't seem like he really has a move to combat that, to either dummy to the inside, dummy to the outside, whatever. It just doesn't seem like he has that in his arsenal right now, and that's something that, along with all these other mistakes, he just has to get right, or else he's not going to have a chance in this championship with how Oscar's driving right now.
Yeah, I really thought this was a rough weekend for Lando. I think really on and off the track, I think it kind of rubbed a lot of people the wrong way that he tried to downplay how good their car is and sort of tried to make it more about personal about how he's driving it, and whereas Oscar was very clear that, hey, this car is very good, and I have no shame about that. And then they get it on track, and Lando's struggling out there, struggling to bring it home. P6 in qualifying, like you said, and then the race, yeah, he makes up some ground, but a number of failed overtakes out there, and just not his weekend at all. I think Piastri really took a massive leap forward compared to Norris in that battle, not just in points, but also in a sort of mindset that Piastri may be more championship ready at this point than Lando Norris is, just from a championship mentality standpoint. It's still a little early in the season to fully declare that, but we saw what happened last year in the battle with Max, and now we've got this battle with Piastri starting, and things are already looking a little bit dicey for Lando.
Yeah, I think to an extent Lando is right to feel that way about the car and that whole situation, because I feel like ever since his win in Miami, every win since then, pretty much the fan reaction has been, oh, it's the car. You should be winning by a lot more. You should be doing this, doing that with the car you have. And I feel like anytime Oscar has won, no one has had that same reaction. So I think, Lando is okay to feel that way just based on how the public has reacted to Lando's success or lack of success versus I feel like how they have to Oscar's. I will say, I think he's probably wrong, and he knows he's probably wrong that the car is that much better than everybody else. I don't think it's Red Bull, 2022, 2023 levels better than everyone else, but it is the best car out there. So I think he's just taking it a lot more personal than some of these other guys would. I think he really cares about what the public thinks about him for the better or for the worse. So I think, that's kind of why we're seeing that reaction out of Lando. But I think he does need to work on that a little bit mentally because if he's, reacting to everything that the public is saying, it's going to be a hard go for him to win a whole championship and sustain success for an entire season. If he lets everything get to him like that, I know it's hard and it's tough when you're, you have that many people saying that many things about you, but I don't think Max would really care what people think or say about him when he had all those wins with the car that he had in 22 and 23. I think he was pretty content with just getting those wins and not really caring. So I think Lando, he has a lot of work to do, both mentally and just on track. I think he still has, a ton of talent and enough talent to be world champion, but he still has a lot of work to do, in my opinion, to get there both, mentally and just with some mistakes that he's making on track.
Yeah, that's fair. I think obviously as a driver, you want to feel like you're getting rewarded for your accomplishments and people are taking notice. I just, to see a Piastri's kind of calm confidence say, I know I have the best car. I'm going to go out and I'm going to take care of business. And then, Lando just kind of struggled through the weekend. It was just disappointing to see. I'm sure that Lando will bounce back a little bit, but, I said even at the start of the season when I picked Lando for the championship, I was still worried about picking him as a champion just from having that championship mentality that I feel like, I've always wondered if he was lacking a little bit. So we'll see how this plays out. He could totally turn this around and win the next few races and win this going away. But right now, Oscar looks to be the guy with a little more confidence and, just a little more on the ball at the moment.
Yeah, I just think Oscar doesn't really care what other people think about him and, his success and whatnot. I don't think he really gives into the pressures of the media or social media or whatever it may be. Oscar or Lando has, all of his social media following. He has all of his brands that are pretty dependent, I feel like, on what people think about him. So I think he might take a lot of that more to heart than Oscar, which at the end of the day, I think is probably going to hurt Lando in the championship a bit because he's going to be distracted and he's going to be caring a lot about what other people think. To your point, Oscar just being calm, collected, not caring what people have to say or what people think about his wins, his success, or his lack of success, just going out and getting the job done, I think is going to help in the long term for him in this championship. But like I said, I still think Lando has the talent. He has enough. He's just, I feel like he gets in his way too much and gets in his own head a little bit. And those are things that, you can't have when you're fighting for a championship like this. You have to be calm and collected, like we've seen from Oscar and like we've seen from Max in years past, like we've seen from Lewis. Everyone has their moments when they're, gonna be emotional, gonna care, gonna have some outbursts or whatnot. But it's the guys who are able to calm that down and keep those tempered enough are the guys that are gonna have the success long term. And that's one thing I think Lando has to work on a lot is getting that. Not that he has emotional outbursts all the time. I just think he cares quite a bit about what people think. And that's not something I feel like we've seen from a lot of these champions lately, or championship caliber drivers.
Yeah, and I mean that's something we saw from Max in his years as a champion, and I mean still being probably the best driver in the sport. Just he was always, he would spar with the media sometimes, and if there was something kind of outlandish that got reported, he would rebuke that. But he doesn't, I don't think he really at the end of the day cares about what everyone's perception of him is. He just goes out and loves racing and drives that car and, is the best at it. And I think that's kind of the mentality that you have to have. And I think that Oscar has a lot more of that mentality of just, like you said, not really caring about what others think and just focused on going out there and getting the job done. And obviously I still picked Lando, so I'm hoping that he can find it. But yeah, we'll see how that plays out the rest of the year. I don't know whether he has that in him or not.
Yeah, I think it is going to be one of the main storylines, along with just that inner McLaren driver battle there that are going to kind of define this season. Switching over to Ferrari, they had an interesting strategy play this week with both Charles and Lewis, where they went medium on the first stint, where everybody else went soft, and then switched to the medium again. And it looked like that strategy play was going to work out really well for them. You saw Lewis climb up the board. You saw Charles really climb up the board, up the leaderboard. And then, just a bad time for a safety car comes out, put them in a bad spot where they had to choose between the crummy hard tires that weren't working well for anyone this weekend, or as George put it for his Mercedes, an audaciously long stint on those soft tires. And they ended up going with the hard tire, and I'm not sure that worked out exactly how they would have liked for them, but regardless, they had some solid points this weekend. I just think it could have been a lot more if that strategy play worked out for them, and that's something that we haven't seen a lot of, is Ferrari kind of nailing a strategy, but I felt like they nailed it until they got unlucky there with the safety car and kind of threw them off what they were planning. But I feel like at least Charles was on for, a solid podium finish, maybe even a second there before the safety car, and he still could have if he held off Lando. Just didn't have the pace at the end of the day to hold off Lando on the medium while Charles was on the hard.
Yeah, I thought for a little bit in that first stint that Ferrari may have gotten it wrong, but the second stint they were really fantastic. I mean, they were flying around the track. They were sort of the car to beat, I guess, other than maybe Oscar for a while there. They just were blowing by everyone, and so yeah, they got it right this time, I think, and just kind of got unfortunate. I believe I saw that they were second on race pace, and they very easily could have been on the podium, especially with Charles. Lewis ended up making up a lot of ground to make up for kind of a disappointing qualifying, finishing P5 pretty solid given where he started back in 9th, I believe. So yeah, just a really good race for Ferrari, even though they don't have quite the, they're not quite, I think, where a lot of fans want to see them and where they want to see themselves. But I think this weekend was actually a step in the right direction towards a bit of a rebound for Ferrari.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it was a great step in the right direction. You had Charles start on the front row, unfortunately missed out on the podium, but like we said, I think he might have been on it there if they were able to play that strategy out, fully how they would have wanted had the race stayed green the whole time. And I'm right there with you. I thought that that strategy call was the wrong call. I was kind of with Charles, who was saying he didn't think it was the right call. He wanted to go Delta strategy instead of B strategy. I was with Charles, but then when they put on that second set of mediums, I quickly realized that the Ferrari pit wall was actually kind of right for once, and it was good to see, and hopefully they can keep kind of this thing up, like you said, strong race pace, and it felt like quality decision-making until they got unlucky with the safety car. I think if they keep this up, they'll kind of finally bounce back in the championship to where they belong and fighting for at least second in the championship. I thought at the beginning of the year, before the year started, they might have a chance to fight for first. That seems very unlikely now, but to at least fight for second, maybe some race wins down the line, but a lot more podiums certainly throughout the rest of the year if they keep this up.
Yeah, I think they'll be back on the podium soon, and I think that this was hopefully a big confidence booster because you could tell that Charles and Lewis both were sort of lacking in confidence. That clearly this wasn't the start that Lewis especially had hoped for after the move, and it just seemed like there was a lot going on, a lot going wrong on track, and maybe a little bit behind the scenes too. But I mean, these guys, I was never going to doubt the two as drivers, and it was just a matter of time. We've doubted their strategy over and over again, and certainly there'll be races the rest of the year where they get it wrong, but I think there'll be some where they get it right too, and they're going to have some real chances. I think they will win a race at some point this year, and they're, like you said, they're going to end up on some podiums real soon.
Yeah, I agree. I think podiums are in their near future, certainly, and technically they have won a race if you count the sprint with Hamilton. But, a full Grand Prix, I think that they are on for a win for at some point this season. I'd hope for multiple just so that we have the best fight for race wins throughout the season that we can from as many drivers as we can, because right now it seems like at least George with Mercedes has a chance to win a race this season, maybe a couple. Max has already won one. I wouldn't, put it past him to win at least a couple more. And then if you add the Ferraris into the mix as well, we might not have that, 4-team, 8-driver battle for the championship that we thought we might have at the beginning of the season, but I think we'll still have enough to make this season super exciting and get to a point where it seems like anybody can win a race once we head into a weekend, which is really exciting and what I think we were all hoping for to start.
Yeah, I mean, really, we've only seen 4 drivers on the podium so far this year, and I think this was a year where we felt like it could be up to a 4-team battle for wins and for podiums. So we're going to see some more variety here as the year goes on. We're going to see both those Ferrari guys get on the podium sooner or later, and we're going to see, I think, Antonelli probably on the podium at some point, and we're going to see some surprise podiums too. I think Yuki's got a good shot to get up there, even though he's on a top team. It'd still be a little bit of a surprise, and we're going to see some off the wall stuff too. So yeah, I'm really excited to see where the rest of the season goes. I know that we talked a little bit earlier about how not every race has been a great entertainment so far this year, but I think that we're going to have some good ones here coming up, and as we get to the European part of the year, I think things are going to get really exciting.
Yeah, I agree. I'm right there with you. Let's get to a couple quick things before we go to our personal podiums. I just wanted to shout out Kimi Antonelli. I thought he had some great overtakes in this race. One lunged up the inside against Carlos Sainz. I thought that was an excellent move. Had another great one on Gasly. Had a good battle with Max Verstappen as well. He eventually got the better of Max there. So I thought, Antonelli was extremely impressive this weekend with his overtakes. Unfortunately, the strategy that Mercedes had him on just didn't jive with that safety car time at all, and he misses out on the points. But I thought it was another great week from the rookie. I thought he showed good pace all weekend, and especially in the race. I thought he had some great moments and some great overtakes. Like I said, just got a little unlucky with the strategy at the end with Mercedes there.
Yeah, that safety car was brutal timing for him. I think he probably got it worse than anyone else in the field. But it was really a fascinating race for him coming in 11th. And like you mentioned, a lot of that is due to strategy. But those moves were superb. And I think we saw some of the most skill we've seen out of him yet, even with a very impressive first few races. So I'm still thrilled to watch this guy, see where he goes. Like I just said, I think he's going to be on the podium pretty soon, one of these races. We're kind of due for a surprise Mercedes weekend like we got a couple times last year, where they just popped up for a weekend and were the team to beat. I think we're going to see one of those in these next few race weekends, and that'll be Antonelli's time to get up on the podium. He's ready for it.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think he really deserved points this weekend, and good points at that. It's a shame that the strategy worked out the way it did for him, but Russell's already close enough to win races at this point in that Mercedes, and if they have some weekends like they had last year where they assert themselves as the dominant team and the team to beat, Russell's going to have a great chance at a few wins, and Antonelli's going to have a chance at some wins and some podiums as well. So, I just think Antonelli's been extremely impressive, and I think he got a little less than what he deserved at the end of the day for his work this weekend. We also had a lot of issues with DRS, which was very odd. You had that with George. You had that with Leclerc as well and some other drivers throughout the field. Liam had an issue with it in his qualifying run where he was out in Q1 once again. So it was really just kind of an odd situation this weekend with the DRS. And why that wasn't working, I'm not sure. And we also had issues with Red Bull and their pit box. Their red light turning to green, it wasn't turning for some reason. The drivers didn't know when to go, so that hurt their stops. It was just a really confusing weekend for some of the technology aspects, why some things weren't working, and a lot of other things were. It was just kind of odd.
Yeah, this was really a bizarre weekend for that all around. I mean, the timing systems going out repeatedly definitely made it frustrating on the broadcast to keep up with. Like I mentioned, I think there were a lot of battles throughout the field this week that were entertaining to watch, but you go laps at a time without really knowing who was in battles because sometimes the broadcast misses them, and then you don't have the timing there as well. I like looking at that timing board to kind of get an idea of where we might be going next, who is kind of keeping it close, who's on the charge, and we had none of that. So that was really disappointing. And then the at the track issues with the DRS and everything else, it's just kind of disappointing for a series like F1 not to have this sorted. I know that occasionally you're going to get some randomness. I know that IndyCar just had the thermal club power issue, and sometimes stuff like this just happens. But for a series like F1 and in Bahrain, this is their most important sporting event of the year. I'd assume it's you'd like to see this get figured out and get sorted. So yeah, from a broadcast perspective, it definitely made things difficult.
Yeah, that's a great point, and that's really what I wanted to hit on next was the broadcast. It felt like they were just kind of off this weekend. We're kind of missing things, and part of that was the issue with the scoring pylon and, not being able to see that for a good portion of the race. And that's something that you really don't know how much you use it and how much you miss it until you don't have it up there. And you realize, I'm looking at this thing quite a bit to keep up with the race. You really don't realize it until it's gone. And I feel like at least I look at the scoring pylon on the side just as much as I am looking at the cars on track most races, because I like to see where, the guys that I'm following and the battles that I'm watching closely, how those are going on. If it's F1, if they're in DRS range or whatever, if it's NASCAR or IndyCar, I just like to see which battles are close and whatnot. So yeah, that's one of those things you really don't realize how much you miss it until you don't have it. So that was a shame that they were. I don't know what exactly the issue was. I don't know if it was a TV issue. I don't know if it was because what we were having issues with seemed like Russell's transponder and the DRS was, that was all off as well. So I don't know if that was the TV's fault necessarily, but it was, it sucked to not have it there. And then the other thing that I noticed from the broadcast is when Oscar crossed the finish line and Crofty was giving his, race-winning call, they were showing that Russell-Lando battle for second. They didn't even switch it to full screen. They had Oscar on the side mini screen there on the scoring pylon. I thought that was kind of low-key disrespectful to Oscar for the race that he put on. I know we had a good battle there towards the end in the closing lap for second, but you really got to show your leader crossing the finish line and give him that kind of credit that he deserves for putting on such a great race. And especially in F1, when guys win going away like this, you really don't see them the whole race anyways. So you'd at least like to have that little moment in the sun for him where he gets some of the credit he deserves for winning that race. There is something to be said for showing the closest battle on track, and I like that. Maybe a side-by-side screen would be nice if you have a close battle like that at the end of a Grand Prix, where you can show both of them, with an equal amount of screen that they're taking up an equal amount of screen. I think that would probably be better than having the race winner cross on a mini screen on the side. I think that was, a tough miss from F1, and it sucks because I feel like they usually have one of the better broadcasts in motorsport, and that was just kind of a big whiff.
Yeah, that was certainly disappointing. I think it was a pretty easy fix too. They could have showed that Lando George battle on the small screen, because
Yeah,
I'm sure
exactly.
a lot of people still had interest in that, and then show Oscar crossing the finish line on the big screen, because like you mentioned, he deserved that moment, and they don't really show the leaders that often in a race like that. So why not give him that moment? It's a big win for him. He's only got a few so far in his career, so yeah, absolutely. He deserved that moment. And it was disappointing of the broadcast to kind of cut away there, and just kind of confusing. I don't know how much of the timing issues and all that was on them versus on F1 and the FIA. So I'm not going to blame them too much for that. But yeah, they certainly did make some choices in the broadcast this week, with some battles that they did and didn't show, and then the end of that race was definitely a disappointing decision from them, and hopefully they'll hear the feedback and change that for next time.
Yeah, that was really odd from, like I said, a production that I usually enjoy watching, and I think they get right most of the time. Let's move to our personal podiums, though. And first, I have Oscar Piastri. Obviously, we've said what we have to say about his race already. It was an incredible performance, and if he keeps us up, it's going to be hard to battle for him in the championship here. In second, though, I had Pierre Gasly, first points of the year for that Alpine team. I thought he drove an incredible race, finished 7th after qualifying 5th, was, on pretty equal pace, really, with the guys around him, with like Max, with Lewis, who were the two guys in front. I thought he was able to keep pace with those guys for most of the race. And yeah, I just thought it was a really good weekend for him. One that I kind of expected him to come out of the gates with, but, maybe the Alpine is just, those first few tracks just weren't really what the car was liking, and this track, was able to bring out the best in that car, and I think we're going to see a lot more performances like this from Gasly, too, throughout the season, on the tracks where the Alpine will let him, kind of shine. And then in third, I had Oliver Bearman. Once again, another race and more points scored for Ollie with a 10th place finish. I know he got beat out by his teammate. Ocon finished in 8th, but he started in last place and took that Haas all the way up into the points. So I think you have to shout that out when you have a Haas go up 10 spots and get into the points. I think that was an incredible drive, and Bearman just keeps on impressing me and showing me just how much talent he has. That he's one of, if not the most talented rookie on this pretty stacked rookie grid right now. So far, I think him, Hadjar, and Antonelli have been the standouts of the rookies. But Bearman just, an incredible drive here, P20 to P10 in that Haas.
Yeah, I've gone with Oscar first as well. Again, like you said, not much more to say there. I've actually gone with George Russell second. I thought the way he held off Lando at the end of that race was pretty superb, especially given all the issues that car clearly had. They had issues with the screen inside the car, and there was all kinds of stuff going on the last 10, 15 laps. And for George to be able to hold on there was really impressive. And then I've gone with Ollie third as well. I think he's just been phenomenal so far. Even after a mistake in qualifying, like you mentioned, ends up putting him in last, he still comes all the way back to get a point for Haas. I think he's been phenomenal. He's up to 5 out of 7 races now, I believe, in his career that he has scored points, and the 2 that he didn't were just crazy weather races that he'll probably get better at over time. But he's really been so impressive so far in F1, and I think he's just another one of these rookies that has been fantastic so far. I think pretty much all of them have had their bright spots this year and really had moments that they've shined, and it's cool to see the rookie class delivering in this way, because they've been phenomenal. But I think Ollie and Antonelli have been the 2 that especially have stood out so far.
Yeah, I like I said, there's not really a lot more to say about Ollie and a lot of the rookies we've had so far. Just, what they've given us. They've given us some great performances. Like you said, Ollie finishing points 5 of the 7 races in his career so far, with 6 of those coming in the Haas. Just great work from him. And, one of those races he missed out was both of the races he missed out on the points were rain races, right? So Yeah, just once Ollie gets that figured out, I mean, he's got pretty much everything in his bag right now to become one of the great F1 drivers of the future, in my opinion, and that's what I would hope for him as well.
Yeah, I was a little bit worried about him coming into the year, that maybe we were overrating him based off a couple performances last year, but he's been superb so far. And just to shout out your other driver on the podium, Gasly was fantastic this week, and I don't think he really could have done better than 7th given the circumstances. It does look like that Alpine has kind of made some strides, and obviously this is the first weekend. They've gotten some good points for the team, and a little disappointing. Doohan ends up down in 14th, and I really thought he could have been up there fighting for points at one point. But Gasly still in 7th. Yeah, really couldn't have done much more. It was going to be tough to hold off Hamilton and Verstappen there at the end. So, credit to Gasly as well for quite a race there.
Yeah, and Doohan, like you said, I thought he was on for a great race as well, and some points for him. I think that safety car probably hurt his race as well, which is a shame because after last weekend, it was good to see him bounce back. He had that heavy crash and seemed pretty hurt throughout that Japanese Grand Prix. Coming back here with all the rumors of his seat being on the line to start the season, some points would have been nice. But I think the guys at Alpine will see. He drove an incredible race, and I thought he deserved some points there. And I think points are coming pretty soon for him as well. So, it was a good race for Doohan there. As my stinker of the week, I have Lando Norris. I know he recovered from P6 to P3, still finished on the podium, still holds the championship lead, but you can't make as many mistakes as he did and, expect to win this championship. And at the end of the day, one race is, not what we're here for when we're looking at Lando this year. We're looking at, he has to put these races together as a whole to build a championship. And right now, with those mistakes, you're just, that's not what you were looking for. I think if he would have recovered to P2, and even with all of the issues that he had, I think we might be looking a little differently here. But P3, still on the podium, but yeah, not the weekend that Norris was looking for in his championship bid.
Yeah, it feels a little bit unfair because we've already kind of harped on him a little bit, and he did end up on the podium, but I've gone with Lando as well. Just I felt like it was tough to pick someone else. There was a lot of good weekends out there, and not a lot of stinkers. Even like a guy like Carlos Sainz, who ends up finishing in last, and then I've piled on a little bit so far this year. He has that incident with Sonoda and a giant hole in the side of his car, and was kind of fighting for points before that, so would have been a little bit harsh. And I just think every point matters in this championship battle with Lando, and so to miss out on some points there, and that Russell finishing second instead of him, and then just all of the issues throughout the weekend, the qualifying, the a few bad attempts at passes and whatnot, cooking the tires a little bit. It's a little bit harsh to go for a double stinker of the week here for Lando with both of us, but I think it just, I think he's the guy this week.
Yeah, major double stink for Lando this weekend, sadly. But like you said, I think touching on Carlos before we move on here, I thought he was having, a pretty good weekend here for Williams and was on pace for his, first real points with that team, crossing the line at least in the points. And it was a shame that it didn't end up working out for him with that huge hole in the side pod, like you said. I thought he was driving a great race before that, probably would have ended up in the points, and seemed to be much more in tune with that car this weekend and on pace with his teammate Albon there. So it was a shame what happened there for Carlos, but I think he's starting to get things together, and we should see some pretty good performances from him and from Albon, and one of the better teammate battles I think we're going to have this year as these next few weekends come up.
Yeah, I mean, I think he'll get it back together. He qualified 8th and well ahead of Albon this weekend. And like you mentioned, it looked like he had the pace, looked like he could have been in the points, or even if he just missed out, it would have been still a decent weekend, especially with some of the troubles that Albon had. So, yeah, I'm not overly worried, just a disappointing few weeks to start, and then kind of some bad luck this week with that Tsunoda incident.
Yeah, I think he's going to be fine. Let's move on now to NASCAR at Bristol. Kyle Larson dominates the day at Bristol at the half-mile oval short track there as he leads 411 of the 500 laps, wins both stages, sweeps those, wins the race for his second win of the season. What a performance for the guy who sits fourth in standings right now, and let's be honest, he's a week removed from kind of an embarrassing showing at Darlington, spinning himself out on the fourth lap where I thought he had a great opportunity to have a good race there. Ended his day very early on. Comes back this week and just completely dominates. Once he realizes that it's not a tire-saving race, he goes ahead, takes the lead, and takes off from there. And we never really see him again the rest of the day. I mean, he's just up front, cooking his way through the field. And yeah, I thought it was a really dominant performance from Larson. And it just feels like kind of every time you forget about Larson and you think he's a little bit down and out, he puts in a performance like this and you're just reminded of who he is, and he's just, whoa, like I did not see that one coming. I mean, if you look at his stats at Bristol, he looked great here and he had a great opportunity to win this race and have a good finish, but it just feels like when you kind of gets into a bit of a lull and you forget that he's who he is, you just get reminded pretty quickly that he is probably still the best driver in NASCAR right now.
Yeah, I was going to say there's a reason why I think most people would kind of give him as the default answer for best driver in NASCAR, and you just can't hold him down for too long. He's just, like you mentioned, he'll have a bad weekend here and there, but he comes back extremely impressive this weekend, and for my money, it's the most dominating performance of the year so far. I mean, leading over 400 laps in a 500 lap race is about as good as it gets, and other than some moments there like Blaney going along with the tires and taking the lead for a little bit, like other than a couple moments like that, it was Larson out in front all day long, just pure dominance from the five.
Yeah, once he got past Bowman and into the lead there, that was it for him. That's all she wrote. So yeah, I thought it was one of Larson's better performances really, in NASCAR, and he's had a lot of really good ones, and that was one where it was just unstoppable, kind of a week removed from what Byron was doing at Darlington, and a Hendrick car dominating there as well. We come here, another Hendrick car dominates the day, and they actually get away with it and get the win this week, whereas last week, with the cautions and everything that came out, and Byron's team's, bad strategy doesn't work out for them here. It does work out for Hendrick. Larson gets a really big win. Obviously we knew he was going to have race wins coming into this year, but now he's tied for second with the second most wins, one behind Bell now, and I think he's coming to really take the battle to Bell, and I think that'll be a fun, sort of rivalry battle to watch out for the rest of the season is him, Hamlin, and Bell. I feel like those are the guys that have kind of lifted and separated from the rest of the group right now. And, to watch a championship unfold between those three, I think is going to be a lot of fun. There's still a lot of other players, obviously, Byron, Blaney, guys like that, but I think those are the three guys right now that you have to look at and say those are the best of the pack.
Yeah, I was going to say Byron's still top of the standings, and he's second in laps led so far this year. So I think, Byron's right there with him. I think it's really a two-team battle, I guess, at least for the regular season, between Hendrick and Joe Gibbs Racing, taking up the top 5 spots right now in the standings. Your next closest would be Blaney in 6th, and like we said, he's due for a little good luck, but those Penske guys, Blaney and Logano, will be around in the playoffs, and they'll get their moments then. But for regular season dominance, these 4 or 5 guys, really, I think it's these 4: Byron, Hamlin, Bell, and Larson, and then you got Chase Elliott right there in 5th, who once he gets himself in victory lane too, maybe we'll be talking about him. But again, another year where he has kind of struggled to put it in a victory lane. Regardless, Larson was due for another performance like this, and I think he's got a few more in him before the end of the year. He's going to end up, I think, winning probably. He's at 2 right now. I think he could get to at least 5 wins by the end of the year, especially considering how many he got last year. It would still be less than that, but still quite the season.
Yeah, maybe I was a little too not harsh, but just forgetful about Byron there. Like you said, most laps led so far, first in the standings, and won the Daytona 500 for the second straight year. So yeah, maybe probably should have added Byron in there as well. But like you said, I think it's probably a 2-team battle between the top guys at Gibbs and the top guys at Hendrick right now. And we've talked about this, but I'm sure those Penske guys will come around, especially Blaney as the season goes on. But yeah, it feels like at least Larson, Bell, Hamlin, and Byron are kind of the cream of the crop right now, and those are the guys that this championship is probably going to be decided between maybe adding in a Penske car or two. So at least that regular season championship, like you said, is going to be come down to one of those 4, I think. The big story of the day at Bristol, though, was I think just the lack of tire wear. A year removed from the insane tire wear race we had at Bristol last year, the tires weren't lasting 30 laps last year. And a day after, where it looked like in practice again on Saturday, the tires were degrading pretty heavily. It looked like we might have a repeat of that race that we had a year ago here. I'm not sure that the race that we got was one that anybody expected, where guys were running easily over 100, 150 laps on those tires with little to no issues, not much fall off at all in that race. I'm no tire expert by any means, but it's crazy that we can go from the tire deg that we had in practice a day prior to what we saw in the race the day after on the same track with the same tire compound. Obviously slightly different weather conditions, but nonetheless just crazy to me how I don't know if it was all the weather conditions or the teams really learned a lot from practice and put that into their set. I'm not really sure exactly how that happens. Like I said, I'm not a tire expert, but it was crazy that the race ended up the way it did after what we were all expecting last year in spring and then Saturday in practice as well.
Yeah, I mean, they clearly did not find the middle ground, and I'm sure it's not an easy job. We talked about this before, finding this middle ground between what we saw previously in Bristol, where the tires were basically falling off the cars, and then seeing this where you have a guy like Blaney going over 180 laps on one set. I'd love to see a middle ground. I know it's not easy, and I know that it's very dependent on things like track temperature. It's not always going to be exactly perfect, and that's okay, but we got to find something in between here, something where we can get a couple more stops in there, maybe a little more strategy and a little more just having to see the drivers worry about tire saving and managing the car and playing that right, instead of, like you mentioned, Larson kind of realizing it's not a tire-saving race and then just going out and dominating it. It would be a lot of fun to see these guys have to stretch it at the end and really push the tires instead of kind of being very comfortable with what they ended up with.
Yeah, I think we all would have liked to have seen something different, maybe 70, 80 laps on those tires, maybe even a little less down in the 60s. Just a little more tire wear to where, like you said, Blaney can't run 180 laps on those tires. Really just, take it all the way on fuel. That's not what we were expecting. That's not really what I think the fans wanted to see, especially as it was hyped up to be this crazy tire race, and was really just kind of the complete opposite of that, to be honest. I'm not really sure exactly what happened there. Like I said, I'm not, the world's foremost expert on tires, but and maybe this just does show how difficult it is for Goodyear and those guys to really make a tire that wears exactly how we want every week, just because, like you said, or like we've said in the past, changing weather conditions, changing track conditions, changing setups, everything changes very quickly. And it's hard for Goodyear to keep up with that and, really anticipate that coming into a weekend and make the perfect tire. So maybe we should give a little bit more slack here to the guys with the tires. But I also think it's on us to really, let it be known to NASCAR what we want to see from these races. And that kind of leads into our next question here is, was Bristol a good race? This is something that we see. Jeff Gluck puts out a poll on his Twitter every week of, was whatever race a good race? And I want to start kind of adding this into our weekly discussions here as well, because I think it's a good judge of where the fans are at with the sport and what we really want to see. And to me, I'm going to say no, it was not a good race. I think a big part of that was due to what we were told with the tire wear and what was going to happen going into the race. High tire saving, tire deg race, and it really was not that. And passing is still a bit too difficult here at Bristol, at really all the short tracks in NASCAR. And to me, I actually kind of enjoy the multi-groove racing. I know it's not, your old school classic Bristol of on the bottom line and bump and move guys out of the way. To me, that's not really as big of a part of it. I would like to see more of that, certainly, but the multi-groove racing isn't too big of a deal to me, in my opinion. It's just not that classic Bristol that we all know and love, that, used to put on the best, or one of the best, if not the best race of the year in NASCAR every time you went there. And now you can see, based on the fans and their turnout and just the excitement around Bristol, has just kind of disappeared. And it's a shame with, what we used to have at Bristol, that stadium used to be full, and now, you can't really get it 3/4 of a way full. For NASCAR, it's a tough look, and really, main NASCAR country there. Everyone around Bristol loves NASCAR. That's a big part of the culture and the community around there. And it's just tough that you can't get, one of your main tracks and one of your main attractions in NASCAR to have a little bit more excitement. Just sucks.
Yeah, and I was going to mention the Gluck poll actually when I saw this question. Even not knowing it was direct reference to it, but it was 80% negative last time I checked, and I agree with that. I think it's not the worst we've ever seen at Bristol or anywhere. I don't think it's worthy of being like a 95% negative or anything, but there's certainly a lot of work to be done. Bristol used to be such an entertaining race, and the quality has certainly dropped off the last few years there. I don't think it was an all-time bad race, but it certainly was not where the standards should be for short track racing, and Bristol especially being what used to always be one of the most entertaining races of the year.
Yeah, and we're going to get to our personal top 3 here soon, but I'll just go ahead and say my stinker of the week, and that it's what we've been talking about right now, is just this Bristol-Next Gen car mix is not really what we want to see, and not conducive to great racing, the best racing that we can get at Bristol, which we all know what that can be and the excitement that can produce. And some of the most iconic moments in NASCAR history have come from Bristol. And with this mix, I mean, we've had a couple of good moments here and there, but it's not the level that it once was. And I know things change and the track has changed somewhat, and the cars have changed, obviously, but short track racing, and especially Bristol, I feel like is kind of the epicenter of that in NASCAR. And if you think of short track racing and NASCAR in the same sentence, you're probably thinking of Martinsville or Bristol. And I feel like those two tracks have kind of become obsolete to the great races we've once seen, and that's just a shame. So I think this is something that NASCAR really needs to focus on, is getting this right. Getting the short tracks back to what they used to be, even if that means you have to admit you made a mistake with some of the design of the next gen car. I think the fans would much rather have that than what we're getting right now. So that's my stinker of the week. I know we're not quite there yet, but yeah, that's it was just a shame to see what we got. Like you said, it wasn't like a 95% horrible race. I would probably say it was, 60-40 to the bad, in my opinion, not even 80% like you said the poll is. But I think that's just a little bit of frustration, too, from fans of what we want to see at Bristol versus what we're actually getting.
Yeah, and I think we'll get back there one day. I think we just, like you mentioned, NASCAR needs to sort of, I don't know if own up to it is the right word, but acknowledge the issue and go in and continue to tinker with it. And, of course, with the tires as well, continue to work on those. And eventually we'll find a balance and make it work. But, yeah, it's just not. We don't want to keep going on like this because it's a consistent talk every time we go to a short track now that this is the issue that continues to happen over and over again. We continue to complain about the short track racing, so I think it would be great for NASCAR. A few of their crown jewel or biggest races, I guess, not officially crown jewel, but most of them, but some of their biggest races are at short track, some of the fan favorites. So, yeah, we need to see those get fixed, hopefully, in the near future here.
Yeah, and, NASCAR, like, listen to your drivers here. You have Denny Hamlin as, one of the biggest podcasts in the NASCAR space. You have other guys with huge platforms as well, and guys with a lot of experience, obviously, driving the car. They know exactly how things are going to react and what they want to feel in the race car and, what's going to produce the best racing. I think we need to have a few more tests on these short tracks and just let NASCAR really, really listen to what those guys have to say and what tweaks they think they can make, at least to this current version of the car, to make short track racing better until, at least a little bit better and at least a little bit more digestible to the fan until we get to that next generation of race car, whenever that is. Just so that we don't lose these short tracks and the love and the allure of short tracks in NASCAR, so that we can at least keep that somewhat steady and somewhat alive before we lose that completely. So I would urge NASCAR to really listen to the drivers here, and any sort of changes that they think we could make here. Really try and put that into play and see if it works in real life and see if it doesn't. I think that's kind of the best way forward, is listen to your drivers and listen to your fans.
Yeah, and I mean, it is an urgent issue, even though that, like we said, is not an all-time bad race. It's still just, there's been a lot of them that have piled up now, a lot of bad races in a row or disappointing races. So, yeah, the more those continue to pile on, the more urgent this issue is going to be.
Yeah, I think that they have to, get this right and fix it pretty quickly. Moving to our personal top three, I have Kyle Larson, number one. I mean, he led 411 of the 500 laps. I don't know if you could ever put anyone else in that number one spot. Also won the race, swept both the stages. And second, I had Ross Chastain. I thought it was a really solid race from him. Didn't really get shown much on the broadcast, but he looked abysmal in practice, looked abysmal in qualifying, started that day down in 35th. Took that Trackhouse car up to 7th. Both of his teammates were back there struggling to have a good race, but Ross and that one squad found something with that car to at least make it somewhat serviceable in the race and get around for a top 10 finish in 7th. I thought that was really good from them, get some solid points, and a team that hasn't looked good in qualifying all year, really. They've had some good finishes in races, and they sit 11th in points. If they can get that qualifying part figured out, I think that they're in for some good finishes as well coming up here. And then in third, I had Ty Gibbs, by far his best performance of the year. In 2025, started 6th and finished 3rd. I think things are really starting to kind of turn around there for that team in the 54 squad, with a couple top 10 finishes in the row, 9th last week at Darlington and 3rd here in Bristol. I think things are starting to turn the right direction for them. And, maybe I'm not sure if they'll win a race this year. I don't know if they've quite got that pace yet, but maybe they can make a run at pointing their way in after really not a very good start at all for that 54 team and Ty Gibbs. A lot of question marks surrounding that start for both him and Brad Kay, I think, were the two big ones, but at least Gibbs, I think, is starting to sort things out.
Yeah, so I got Larson as well first in my top three. Like we mentioned, probably the most dominant performance of the year, so I couldn't really have him anywhere else. I've gone with Ty Gibbs in second. I just think because we've talked so much about him this year and about his struggles, to see him come back and get a really great finish for JGR and come in a podium position, I guess, in this race is really phenomenal for him and for this team. And then for my third, I've gone with AJ Allmendinger. Just another fantastic weekend for him, coming in ninth, and really just drove a superb season so far. I think as far as your drivers on your smaller teams, I guess per se, Allmendinger has been delivering as much or more than anyone at week to week, and started 8th, finished ninth. Just a really, really solid all-around weekend for him. This was another like F1. It was really like 4 drivers for 3 spots, because I also thought Ross was fantastic coming up all the way from 35th into that top 10 spot. But yeah, for me, I just went with switching it up a little bit, and so that's my 3: Larson, Gibbs, and then AJ Allmendinger.
Yeah, Allmendinger has been really good all year, like you mentioned. Some really underrated performances there for colleagues. So, a short track ringer kind of, but he's also having some success on ovals, and maybe he squeaks into the playoffs too and gets a win on a road course. I wouldn't be shocked there at all for him in that 16 team. What was your stinker of the week here? I already did mine, and the NASCAR Bristol-Next Gen combo. But what did you have here for stinker of the week?
Yeah, so in the preview, I talked about that I had high expectations for RFK this week, and thought with their 3 guys all having a great pass at Bristol, and really thought this could be a track where they rounded into form, because they've been kind of disappointing so far this year. But unfortunately, that did not happen. And nobody really had a total disaster race, but their best finisher was Brad in 16th, and these are 3 guys, like I said, all top 10 average finishes at Bristol going into this race in a next-gen car. So to not have even one driver make a good run, my projected winner, Chris Buescher, ends up in 25th, and really had nothing going all day. Priest in 20th, Keselowski in 16th, just not their weekend at all, and not an all-time bad weekend, just given these guys' history at the track. I thought they could scavenge out a little better, and they're a team that really needed some run here and didn't get it.
Yeah, Keselowski, though, top of the RFK guys. I mean, you needed something to go right for Brad. I mean, it's not much to hang your hat on 16th, but maybe that's a good sign. I'm not really sure. Just kind of hoping for something for Brad K. But I mean, you never know. Those at least he beat all of his teammates. So.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's a little positivity for Brad to hang his hat on, but yeah, I was certainly hoping for a little bit more, I guess.
Yeah, I think they probably were too down there at RFK. Let's move now to IndyCar. Kyle Kirkwood wins from pole position in dominant fashion once again. All three of these winners just kind of dominating their races. He moves to second in points, 34 points behind second place finisher but championship leader Alex Palou. It was great to see Kirkwood get back on the top step of the podium and get his first win of the season after a winless 2024. He and that 27 team were just kind of out Palouing Palou today, to be honest, making great strategy calls, really good on tire saving, really good on overall pace. To do it right in front of Palou too. I mean, it was a great showing from Kirkwood, and one that I think him and that 27 team and really all of Andretti should be pretty excited about. I think we said in the preview this could be a great weekend for Andretti, and I think that their other guys might have wanted to finish a little higher based on where they started the race, but regardless, to get a win here, I think it was a very good weekend for Andretti as a whole, but also, I mean, really for Kirkwood and that 27 team.
Yeah, big weekend for Andretti this weekend, at least for Kirkwood, and I really enjoyed this race. I thought it was exciting, and even though, like you said, Kirkwood was dominant in the sense that he led a lot of laps and was the car to beat, but this definitely wasn't a snoozer as far as who was going to win the race. Maybe down to, these last few laps when he grew a little bit of a lead, but we saw him really battle with Palou and those last pit stops, especially having to get out before Palou. That definitely made for some entertaining TV and a good time as a race fan. But yeah, I think it was just great for the series that someone other than Palou won. I mean, of course, at the end of the day, IndyCar is too different track to track for a guy to win every single race. It's just not going to happen. But to see someone come in in a race that Palou definitely could have won and steal it, a guy like Kirkwood too, who hasn't won in a while, but we know his talent, I think was really exciting, and I enjoyed watching this one.
Yeah, it was really odd to see Kirkwood not win last year. He was still really solid. He just didn't have those top-end performances that we saw from him a year prior in 2023 with a couple wins. He's won here at Long Beach before, so obviously a place that he's very comfortable with and a place that he likes, a place that Andretti performs pretty well at too. That helps a ton. He's one of those guys that seems to be really solid on these street courses. He has found something, kind of a rhythm to settle into on these street courses that works extremely well for him. One of the better talents in IndyCar and one of the more underrated talents in IndyCar, in my opinion. He's on a team with Colton Herta and a former F1 driver, Marcus Ericsson. That's not exactly going to help in terms of, maybe growing your popularity or being one of the better known guys within that team. But if you keep putting in performances like this and like we saw in 2023, that'll grow naturally. And a lot of people that watch IndyCar all the time and pretty frequently, I think, understand Kirkwood's level of talent. And good to see that kind of finally came through fully after it was a frustrating year last year. Like I said, it wasn't necessarily a horrible year. He still had some good finishes in there, but one that he would have liked to have come out of with a win. And then to get one in the third race of the year here, it could be setting up for a very good season for him. And especially on street courses, I wouldn't be surprised to see him maybe snag another one here. He seems to just have some sort of rhythm, like I said, that he gets into here that works very, very well.
Yeah, I mean, Kirkwood was never a guy that I was worried, always not going to win again. He was always going to get back there, but he's kind of had like a Chase Elliott kind of season, like we were talking about with NASCAR. Just a lot of good finishes and not a lot of wins. So I'm really thrilled for him that he got back to victory lane. Sounds like he did made some changes over the off season and really had his mind set on getting back here. Every driver does, but especially after a season like that, I'm thrilled to see him back here, and I think it's really cool to see him all the way up second in the championship. I don't expect him to be battling with Palou for that first spot, at least by season's end, but he's got a chance to have a really strong year this year, and hopefully he does. I was pretty high on Andretti going into this year, and it'd be great to see a couple of those guys up there fighting in the top spots.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be hard for anyone to battle with Palou for that championship lead with how he's driving right now. But if anyone has a good chance to do it, I think Kirkwood is one of those guys if he continues to drive like this. And not just this race this weekend, but I feel like he's had a really good start to the season overall with some solid finishes through 3 races here. So not saying that he can catch Palou. It's going to be hard for anybody to catch Palou this season already, only through 3 races. That's just how good Palou's been. But if anybody can do it, I think Kirkwood is one of the few guys if all things go right for him moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely has it in him. He's, like you mentioned, he's done well on the street courses. We've still got a few more of those, and he's shown some versatility too. He can get it done on a lot of different kinds of tracks. So maybe as we get later in the season here and things start to diversify a little bit, maybe he'll be able to make a bit of a run. Palou's going to be a lot to overcome, but even if he finishes in second or third in this championship, it'd be a very successful season for Kirkwood.
Yeah, I agree. One of the big things in this race was the mix in strategy. The guys who started on soft tires and pitted early versus the guys who started on the harder primary tires went a little bit longer on the first stint. created a really nice strategy mix. I'd argue it worked out actually pretty nicely for the guys that went a bit longer. I know they didn't win the race, but you look at a guy like Christian Lundgaard, who started in 12th and finished in 3rd because of that, and how he was able to manage that strategy. I think it worked really well for him. Lundgaard, I thought, had a great performance this weekend. Is getting on the podium for the 2nd straight week, finishing in 3rd. And I think this is really one of the great things about IndyCar is not only is the racing very good and the overtaking is much more possible than maybe we see at some of these other places, but I think that the strategy differences are really, I feel like we see a lot of differences in strategy every week compared to some other series. So I think that that's one of those things that makes IndyCar unique as well. And I think it definitely played pretty good this weekend in Long Beach.
Yeah, it absolutely did. I mean, this is never going to be a track that is, one of your top passing tracks, I think, on the calendar, just because of the space constraints. And, maybe it's not quite Monaco, but it's certainly not the easiest passing track you're going to have. So I think anytime on a track like that we see some variation in strategy, it adds a lot to the race, makes it a lot more entertaining and exciting as a fan, and it can just coming down the stretch, I think, just make it a lot better. So, yeah, I think I really do like this track at Long Beach, and I think that this race played out pretty good as far as what you could have expected.
Yeah, speaking of the track, to me, I think we have to look at Long Beach. Of the 4 current street courses in IndyCar, you have Long Beach, St. Pete, Detroit, and Toronto. I think Detroit is pretty unanimously last, although I think I like it better than some other people do, even though it is a complete mess. Toronto is very solid. St. Pete, depending on the year, can produce a great race, or it can kind of produce a snoozer depending on how the fuel saving and all of that goes there. But Long Beach, I feel like, always produces a very, very good race, and one that, like you said, obviously passing is difficult because it's a street circuit, but there are some wider parts on this track that make overtaking, possible and make that kind of thing an actual part of the race, not like somewhere where we see where the guys just stay in line and follow through, which is very good and I think very beneficial for a street course, and one that, you have obviously IMSA raced here as well this weekend. It can support many different types of series, and it produces great racing in all of those series, I think, especially for being a street course. So to me, it's the best street course in IndyCar. Personally, us living close to St. Pete, I love that one as well, just because we've gotten to go a few times, and it does produce great races as well on certain years. But I think Long Beach kind of trumps it just a little bit, and to me, it's the best IndyCar has to offer on the streets right now. But yeah, I want to get your opinion here as well on what you think for Long Beach as it rates among the IndyCar street courses.
Yeah, that's exactly where I had it. I had Long Beach in first, and then St. Pete behind it. St. Pete, I think, it can be a little bit more inconsistent. We've seen some really good races there, and also some kind of dull races. I think Long Beach delivers a little bit more, and I also think that I love the race in St. Pete, but the race in Long Beach as well just is really quite an event for IndyCar, and a lot of beautiful views out there, and the fountain and everything. It's really cool. So I would have those two in the top, and then everything else kind of after it. I've kind of gone back and forth on Toronto and especially Detroit. The new layout these last couple of years that they've done through the city, hasn't always been my favorite. So I would say Long Beach and then St. Pete right behind it, and those two are pretty clearly the two best layouts that they've done, or at least that they have on the calendar right now.
Yeah, the other thing going for Long Beach, like you mentioned, touched on a little bit there, is the fan atmosphere. There's always a ton of fans. It's packed out to the brim. Just a really, quality event. It looks like I've never been, but it seems to be a great experience and one that people turn up for every year. So I think that has a lot to do with how good the racing is. Obviously, where it is with the views and everything like that certainly helps. So, yeah, I think Long Beach has to be up there as number one. No disrespect to the other places, but it's just from a full around event standpoint, you have IndyCar and IMSA teaming up for that weekend. That helps as well. And then you have great racing, you have great views, you have everything. So Long Beach, it's got a lot going for it, but I also think it lives up to that every year.
Yeah, I mean, I saw the program for this weekend. They had the stadium super trucks and all that kind of stuff on there too, which we always love. So it looked like a pretty full weekend out there, and certainly one I enjoy getting to one day, because I think IndyCar, from what I've seen, does a pretty good job with that event. And like I said, great location. I think doing these events in cities, but not the biggest cities, I think it's worked out pretty well, especially these coastal areas. It really makes for some great views and good racing, and I think the community kind of gets more involved and rallies around it more than maybe if it was in a bigger city with more going on. So yeah, I think that IndyCar really hit a home run. Obviously, they've been doing this race for a long time, so this isn't recent, but hit a home run with Long Beach and with St. Pete as well. They did a great job. So if they do decide in the future to add more streets, or maybe take out some of the ones they have and replace them, I'd like to see more places kind of along those lines.
Yeah, we'll see how Dallas and that race plays out next year around the Cowboys Stadium and all that. Hopefully that produces a good race as well, another street circuit being added there. Lastly, before we go to our personal podiums, I wanted to touch on this Newgarden seatbelt issue, which was a shame for him because he was running a pretty good race as well, and you touched on it in the preview that he had 10 straight top 10s here. So he has the history. He's that sadly got broken this week due to that seatbelt malfunction. It was a similar issue to the one we saw for Will Power in the championship race last year at Nashville. Another Penske car there. So not really sure if it's I don't know if IndyCar gives everyone the same seatbelt system. I'm not sure exactly if teams outsource that, on their own or whatnot. But it is weird that it's happened twice to these Penske cars. Not something that you usually see very often at all in the span of now, 4 races dating back to last year. Very odd to see. Luckily, Newgarden didn't get into an accident or anything and was, safety comes first, and he made the right decision coming to pit lane there and switching or getting that issue fixed. So yeah, it's a shame for him because he had a really good race, but safety comes first, and just an odd thing that Penske now twice in 4 races they've had seatbelt issues.
Yeah, that two crew had quite the interesting day. I mean, they came in so early at the start there, got the soft tires off, and went straight for it. Really made a pretty bold strategy call, and I think there's a world where that would have paid off, and maybe he doesn't win the race or anything, but it has a nice finish, and instead he ends up with all these seatbelt issues, and yeah, just a really up and down day for that 2 team, and disappointing because, like I mentioned before, he has such a good record here, and he really kind of needed a good performance. I mean, now even through some events like that, not of his own fault, he's down in 10th in the standings, and I know that we'll get to some tracks later in the year that he's also really good on, so it's not a total panic, but definitely a disappointing start for the year. And now all these Penske guys are 8, 9, and 10, McLaughlin, Power, and Newgarden. It's certainly not their ideal start to the year.
Yeah, not what we expected at all from Penske starting this season the way they have. It does feel like in some aspects the pace just isn't there as well. They haven't really threatened for any of these wins. Obviously, Pallou's been as dominant as he has, and even this weekend Palou didn't win. He finished second. So it'd be tough for them regardless, but I just feel like they haven't been there really on pace yet. They've had some of these issues, these really weird issues for Newgarden here, and stuff like that. It just hasn't really been the year that they've wanted to have so far. McLaughlin did start on pole in St. Pete in the first race, and a different strategy, I think he might have been able to win there. So they have that going for them. but it's not the start to the year that they would have wanted, sitting 8th, 9th, and 10th through the first 3 races. And then on top of that, you have, of course, Palou, their main championship rival, so far out front. It's just going to make coming back really hard for any one of those 3 guys. And I had McLaughlin winning the championship this year as well. That seems like it's going to be tough for him given how this year has started. So it is odd that Penske has started off this slow. We see it in NASCAR for them all the time, but in IndyCar, it doesn't really seem like they usually get off to slow starts like this. So very odd for a team that's usually kind of right on top of everything. We'll move to our personal...
I mean, they're still...
You're good.
No, I was just going to say they're still Penske. They'll figure it out. Yeah, they'll figure it out as time goes on, just not the start that they wanted.
Yeah, I'm sure they'll get things going. Our personal podiums now, I have Kyle Kirkwood in first. Obviously, excellent race, holding off Palou, dominant from pole position the entire Grand Prix. And second, I had Christian Lundgaard for finishing third, making that alternate strategy work. Second straight podium for him as well. Great start to his McLaren career. Super excited. I think he's shown a ton of pace so far, and some great driving as well. So really excited for Lundgaard and his start at McLaren. Maybe taking the fight to Pato in the championship there for the McLaren battle. And then in third, I had Stingray Robb, who tied for his best finish of his career in 9th, went on a third alternate strategy with a hard start for them that moved them from 19th to 9th. And then, he was equal kind of on pace to the leaders all day once he got himself in position with that good strategy. Just an excellent showing from him and that Hunkos Hollinger team to get a top 10 finish, especially when his teammate Connor Daly was, pretty far back this weekend. For Stingray to show up and have a great finish like that, really good to see. Hopefully we see more from this and Hunkos Hollinger so that we can just have them as more of a factor more often.
Yeah, so I've gone with the same one too as you. I've got Kyle Kirkwood in first, started first, finished first, led over half the laps. A pretty dominant performance. Like I said, not coasting to it, not coasting to a win, but still a very, very impressive victory for him. For my number 2, I've gone with Christian Lundgaard as well. 26 laps led, and I know a little bit of that might be due to strategy differences and whatnot, but still a really great start to the season for him, and making up 9 spots in this race, coming from 12th into a podium position. He's really impressed me so far this year. And my third is another guy that's really impressed me this year. I've gone with Felix Rosenqvist, coming in 4th in this race, and now he's 4th in the standings as well, through 3 races here so far with Meyer Shank. I think you have to put Palou first for most impressive driver so far, because he's got 2 wins in a second, in 3 races. But man, Rosenqvist has really impressed me so far at Meyer Shank, and I'd have him next up for me as far as comparing these guys' teams they're at to how they've done and where they are in the standings. I think what Rosenqvist has done is very impressive. And and I also thought Stingray Robb had a fantastic weekend. Once again, 4 guys for 3 spots kind of thing, and wanted to switch it up a little bit. But yeah, I went with Rosenqvist there in my 3rd spot.
I was going to say, no Stingray? No Stingray? Top 10? Stingray top 10, no Stingray? Oh, man. That's a shame. That's a shame.
Yeah.
I know Rosenqvist had a great weekend, and he's had a great start, but come on, Stingray. We got to give Stingray some love, man. He top 10? It was a great race.
I know. I'll give it was a great race. It was a great race. So full credit to him. Made up 10 spots. I mean, what more can you say? He was fantastic. He led 12 laps too. That's awesome to see him up there in the top 5.
I know. He might be cooking. You never know.
Up there with the graphics and everything. Yeah.
Huh?
No, I was saying he's up there with the graphics and everything. The top 5 graphics.
Yeah, I know.
For a lot of the race.
Yeah, he was up there the whole time. It was electric. Stinker of the week, I had Pato O'Ward, finished 13th after starting 9th. This has never been his best track by any means. Here historically, he's just kind of struggled. but he needed a much better finish today. I think at least a top 10 would have really helped him in his championship fight. Falls from second to sixth now and 62 points behind Palou in first. I know it's only 3 races in, but Palou, to fight Palou in a championship, it almost feels like you have to be perfect, and you can't really finish outside the top 10 at all in the season. And he's not out of the championship by any means, but I just think it would have been nice for him after starting 9th to maybe bag a top 10 here on his probably his worst track and move on and go grab some more points from here. It wasn't a terrible day. I didn't think really anybody had a terrible day, to be honest, so it was hard to pick stinker of the week, but just given the championship circumstances and where he started, I think we could have seen a little bit more out of Pato.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna go with you here because I think it's very similar to the F1 stinker of the week that we had, and if we're just going based on result, I think it's Joseph Newgarden, but a lot of that was out of his control and just not much you can say there. So yeah, Pato in 13th, certainly not ideal, and like you said, you just can't have those weekends, can't give up that many points, and everybody has some off weekends, but would have loved to see him in the top 10. Would have made it a lot easier to swallow. 13th is certainly not totally awful, not going to be our worst race of the year by any means, but yeah, just for a guy that we think could potentially compete for a championship here down the line, it's not good enough.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. That's why I had him stinker of the week. Just quickly now, we'll touch on the IMSA and Formula E races this weekend. Porsche Penske number 7 car wins their 3rd straight race of the IMSA season. The BMWs started on the front row there, but just weren't, they just didn't have enough, weren't able to hold off the Porsches, who once they got out front just kind of ran away from the field. Another great finish for Porsche to start the season. Just seems like they're kind of dominating that prototype world right now. It'll be really interesting to see what they do come Le Mans, and hopefully they can put in a really solid performance there, because at least on this North American IMSA side, they're really the team to beat right now, and especially that number 7 car too. I mean, those guys are just killing it.
Yeah, they've had quite the year so far. I think they're up there with the most dominating teams in motorsport right now to come in and win Daytona and Sebring and now do it at a race here like Long Beach, not an endurance race, to come in and win. It was very impressive that 7 team is just crushing it right now.
Yeah, I think Porsche's, they're like you said, they're one of the most dominant motorsport teams in the world, just based on what they've been able to do over here. In IMSA, it's been some pretty incredible stuff. And then moving to Formula E, Pascal Wehrlein gets the win after starting 9th on the grid to get Porsche's first win of the Formula E season. It's really an interesting finish to the race over there. Late race red flag kind of put some guys in a tough position trying to get their full allotment of attack mode. They weren't able to do it. Penalized some guys like Norman Nato, crossed the line first. You would think he was the winner, but no, had the penalty, and that took it away from him, moving him down to 6th after starting on pole. And, a tough situation of circumstances there, just given the timing of the red flag and guys not being able to get their full allotment of the attack mode. But nonetheless, I thought Wehrlein drove a great race as well, and deserved a good chance at the win. Only got beat to the line by just a little bit there too. So yeah, I think Wehrlein had a great weekend, kind of deserves the win, but also tough for those guys who just weren't able to use their attack mode because of that red flag.
Yeah, I said before the weekend I thought Porsche was due for one, and it's a little frustrating because I had DaCosta, but Wehrlein gets it done here. Certainly a guy that was going to get it done sooner or later. Last year's series champ was going to get it back. Not quite the start of the year that he wanted, but now he's fully back on track, and I think he'll be in the hunt here in a lot of races to come.
Yeah, it was just really a crazy race in all, to be honest, out there the first time at Homestead and that infield track there. that they have at the oval. It's usually used for an oval for NASCAR, but Formula E going there. Surprised to see that they went there instead of trying to maybe race a modified version of the Miami circuit Formula One races on. But I thought the racing was certainly interesting in the way the attack mode and everything ran. It was definitely a race where it seemed like a lot was happening, but it was also kind of an energy-saving race as well as most Formula E races are. We'll go to our predictions now for next week. We only really have Formula One in Saudi Arabia. WEC will be racing in Italy as well, but we'll just make predictions for Formula One here. This hasn't really been a McLaren stronghold since the introduction of the Grand Prix here in Saudi Arabia in Jeddah. They usually don't start the season very well, though, and this Grand Prix is usually at the start of the year. The only one it wasn't in is 2021, and they weren't, battling for wins then anyways. This year is a bit different as McLaren, have had a much better start to 2025. I have Oscar finishing first. I think he, coming off of this weekend, if he can continue this form, it's going to be really hard for anyone to beat him. And then he's also beaten Lando head-to-head the last 2 years here as well. So a place where Oscar seems a bit more comfortable than Lando. And I think that'll, help him out as well, kind of in that teammate battle. Second, I have Max Verstappen, the best driver here over the last 4 years. I think the car will be better than it was this past weekend in Bahrain. And that'll help him finish second. It won't be easy for him. That car still won't be near the McLaren pace, but I think just his ability to drive around here is going to help him a ton. And then in third on the podium, I have Lando Norris rounding out that podium there. Like I said, I just think Piastri is going to be the better of the two here at this track, and then Max as well. I think we could see another really crazy good showing from him this weekend, which would put Lando down in third and losing control of the championship.
Yeah, we didn't really talk about it, but Red Bull did have quite a disappointing weekend this weekend. Yeah. I mean, I guess Max scavenged a respectable finish, as he always does, but yeah, they were well off the pace, and it seems like they've got a lot going on with that car. I don't doubt that it will be better in Jeddah than it was in Bahrain, but I still don't have them on my podium. We don't have to totally rehash the whole Lando-Oscar argument, but I do have Oscar over Lando here. I have Oscar in first, like you said, sticking with you on that one. And then I've got Lando coming in second. I do think that the McLaren's just got a lot of pace right now, and it's tough to not pick them 1-2, even though they're not finishing 1-2 every race. My third, I've gone with Charles Leclerc. I think that Ferrari, I don't know whether this is going to be their best track or not. I think they're just kind of due for something to go their way and due to return to the podium. They could end up struggling to make the points, honestly, depending on how their weekend goes. But I'm going to choose to have a little bit of faith in them here, and I'm going to say Leclerc is the first one of those two to get on the podium.
Yeah, I was thinking about putting Leclerc on there as well, but it just doesn't really seem like we have, or at least I had anything to really kind of back that up other than the fact that he said this past weekend that he's starting to kind of get better with the car, and they're making some upgrades that weren't always going to show up in Bahrain but might show up elsewhere. Maybe Jeddah's one of those tracks, I'm not sure. So like you said, got to believe a little bit that they'll start to turn things around. I just couldn't pick them to go on the podium, but I would not be surprised at all, like you said, for them to have a great weekend or, kind of a crap weekend as well.
Yeah, I don't really have a lot of technical analysis behind it. It's kind of just more of a their due pick. Mm-hmm. Like it just kind of feels like they're due to return to the podium, and Max will be there, Russell will be there, maybe Antonelli and some other guys, but I'm just gonna say that Leclerc gets it done this week. If not, it will certainly be in short time here.
Yeah, I think it'll certainly be an interesting weekend regardless. I don't know who will finish near the top, who will struggle a little bit. I assume the McLarens will be very good, as they have been all year, but the rest is kind of up for grabs, and that's kind of what's been very good so far about this F1 season is you're not exactly sure who's going to be kind of best of the rest. And even the McLarens, although they are, the best, they haven't, they lost to Max in Japan, so anything can happen, and they can certainly lose out as well. So, should be a great weekend of racing. Jeddah, I think, is, a pretty fun circuit, another circuit where qualifying is, a very big deal. So that'll be fun as well. And always fun to see the cars going that fast around, a street circuit like that, like the one we have at Jeddah. So yeah, it'll be a very exciting weekend.
Yeah, it's going to be another good one. I really enjoy that track in Jeddah. Obviously, sometimes it can get a little dangerous, so I hope everybody is safe this weekend. But it's always exciting, always keeps us on the edge of our seats. So, yeah, I can't wait to watch that one.
Yeah, me too. Well, I think that's everything we have for this week. We'll be back next week to break down that Formula One race in Saudi Arabia. Should be very exciting. Like we touched on, and I hope you guys have a good week, and we'll talk to you next time.
Yeah, we'll talk to you soon. I can't wait to check out that race in Saudi. It's going to be a good time.
Yep, I agree. See you guys.